Yay, it looks like we will definitely be getting FSR 4 in Battlefield 6. Hopefully the driver update, if it's needed, is available right at launch and all of that. But this is in the new Battlefield 6 official PC trailer confirming this. Now, on the topic of getting FSR 4 into games that don't have it, we do have a tweet from DLSS Swapper saying someone on their GitHub just did a manual DLL swap and got FSR 4 to work on an FSR 3.1 game. That means the SDK with those new FSR DLLs will allow any FSR 3.1 game to use FSR 4 sooner rather than later. Remember that very recently the FSR 4 SDK was finally actually released because previously it wasn't just kind of available publicly to work with and all of that. So hopefully that makes the process of getting FSR 4 into games that didn't otherwise support it a little bit easier. Now we are seeing, if you're looking for a Battlefield 6 GPU, that the Arc B580 is not only bundled with Battlefield 6, but I saw a headline that its price in Germany was actually looking pretty good, and so I went ahead and double-checked the US pricing, and I am seeing the Arc B580 at $250. There was the longest time in the United States where these things were so far above MSRP it was ridiculous. So hey, 12 gigabyte card at $250. You know, it's not as attractive as it was completely at launch, because at launch, we didn't have the newer generations from AMD or NVIDIA yet. However, while they have some stiff performance competition in this price point now, especially if we see AMD's 9600 XT in this price point, I think $275-ish, a little more expensive, but similar. You know, a card like this is going to be more powerful, but has 8 gigabytes of VRAM. The 16 gigabyte version is still significantly more expensive. So there is something to be said for the B580. Now, one thought with it on Battlefield 6 specifically is that that game can be CPU limited, and there is still the increased CPU driver overhead to deal with the Arc GPUs. But hey, interesting to at least note the budget option here. Now, on Intel in general, we've been seeing the whole saga with the company, you know, death spiraling employees, etc. Except then, you know, getting some, you know, national security interest as well. There was questions about what was going on with CHIPS Act funding and the US taking a 10% stake. It's been crazy. The latest headline is Intel receives $5.7 billion in CHIPS Act grants under the deal with President Trump as Team Blue gets big on its foundry, bets big on its foundry division. Again, it's going to be a long-term thing, seeing what happens with Intel. You do get the feeling that the US government is pretty serious about having their own domestic chip production. But again, after taking the 10% stake in Intel, Trump was talking about exploring that for other, you know, competitors as well. So I don't know. I'm just reporting what we're seeing as the latest news on that whole situation. The latest news on AMD's future graphics cards is that there is possibly an RDNA 5/UDNA, whichever naming scheme you want to go with here, GPU SKU up to 96 compute units, which would be a lot larger than what we saw with the 9000 series. AMD's 9000 series seem to not be targeting any sort of like 90 class competition, as they have done in previous generations with, you know, back with like the 6900 XT actually going toe-to-toe with the 3090 if you didn't need, you know, DLSS upscale, you know, any kind of like FSR upscaling. There was no FSR, I think, back when that launched. Or, you know, the ray tracing performance wasn't quite there, etc. But there have been times where AMD has tried to have a big high-end Halo-type product. And, you know, if AMD's push continues to try to reach more of a feature parity with NVIDIA, maybe they would feel like a larger Halo-class product could once again make sense. But what is all of this based on? Well, I found this, you know, headline at a variety of places. This one's from WCCF Tech. They're talking about these block diagrams, etc. But they're getting it from Kepler L2 on the AnandTech forums. Now, Kepler L2 does have a history of getting some AMD leaks correct in the past, so that's not something to completely blow off. But I will note that he posted these images with the text, I could not resist the urge to schizo post. So that's not the same thing as saying, like, I just saw slides from AMD. This is definitely what's happening. It's like a schizo post. So anyway, we're still a long ways out from whenever we would expect to see these. So I think even if AMD is considering various configurations behind the scenes right now, we would have yet to know at this point any lock-in on exactly which products they would bring to the market and all of that. Now, we also have been seeing a bunch of leaks regarding the hardware that would be going into like a PlayStation 6 handheld. Now, this is coming from Moore's Law is Dead. Now, Moore's Law is Dead has accurately leaked some PlayStation information ahead of time in the past. I believe he was the first to leak the PS5 Pro hardware, if I remember correctly, and then other outlets then brought out similar information, and then we did get that officially confirmed. So again, when judging all the leaks and rumors, etc., you have to go with, okay, what was the source? What is their track record, etc.? Definitely not everything Moore's Law is Dead has ever predicted has come to pass. But again, PlayStation stuff has had things accurate before. So headline here basically being it'll easily outperform the Xbox ROG Ally X and the base PlayStation 5 with patched games. Again, though, we'll have to see what really happens. You could jump into the Moore's Law is Dead source if you want more of those details on the specific hardware leaks, etc. I don't want to get too far into the weeds on stuff that still seems to be up in that definite rumor mill territory. We'll have to see what happens. AMD RX 9070 GRE, though, also in rumor territory, rumored to get 16 gigabytes of memory launching between September and October. Now, this is a little confusing because there's already a 9070 GRE in the China market, which is a 12 gigabyte GPU. This I found reported at videocards.com. By the way, all my sources will be linked in the video description as always. But their source is board channels. Now, they note here, as well as my own cautions, that board channels does get information from various board partners, but does not always have everything verified and have it come to pass. So make of that what you will. The quote from board channels is AMD graphics cards are planning to upgrade to the RX 9070 GRE version. The latest news on AMD's new graphics card product planning reveals that the RX 9070 GRE series currently only has 12 gigabyte memory module. To meet market demand, AMD will upgrade the memory capacity and may upgrade this series product line in the future. It is understood that AMD is planning to upgrade the RX 9070 GRE model, possibly directly to 16 gigabyte memory capacity, and it will be officially launched between September and October. Now, notice this saying possibly 16 gigabytes, and, you know, saying that September to October. Now, this would be weird to me if they still called it the 9070 GRE, if there was already a 9070 GRE product with different specs. That seems weird. So I don't know about that. Would it maybe be a 9070 XT GRE or something? Or maybe this whole thing is nonsense. We'll have to see. Now, most of the world probably doesn't care right now, but we have seen some GRE products come to a worldwide release in the past. Whether or not that would happen here remains to be seen. So just reporting that that's the current rumors on that situation. Now, something that is not rumored, but is, I think, exciting is, well, let me start with this. So I mostly focus on the desktop PC situation, and I'm not super into gaming laptops. One of my main problems with a gaming laptop is, unlike a gaming PC, where you can have your, like, you know, PC of Theseus, you know, ship of Theseus, you keep changing out the parts, upgrading them over time, and eventually, do you even have anything remaining from the original build? Maybe a case and a power supply. I mean, that's one of the reasons why, you know, good idea not to completely cheap out on your power supply, by the way. Could be good for a decade. But anyway, the point is, laptops do not have anywhere near that level of upgradability, sometimes basically zero, especially if we're talking CPU and GPU upgrades, whereas Framework had released the Laptop 16 with their first generation model, I think in 2023. Oh man, apparently I can't continue reading without a Verge subscription. Anyway, this is posted here. You can go to Framework's website as well. That this is the 2023 original version of the Framework 16 has been upgraded in order to, well, there's now an upgrade available to an RTX 5070. They originally had a 7700S from AMD. So it's interesting that it's not only just an upgrade, but it's switching from an AMD GPU to an NVIDIA GPU. They give some thoughts on it maybe being a 30 to 40% performance uplift, I believe Frameworks claims. Obviously, I don't have one of these to benchmark myself or anything like that. But this is certainly interesting. Being able to actually upgrade the GPU in the laptop really makes me not hate gaming laptops so much. Anyway, not that I really hate gaming laptops, but just for me personally, really miss out on that upgradability. Now, in the desktop side of things, ASRock has had a bit of trouble with their motherboards killing 9800X 3D CPUs. So this was a big thing back in like May or so. Gamers Nexus investigated, and ASRock admitted it could be some BIOS settings like their PBO values, etc. Except we were still seeing reports on Reddit pretty frequently about 9800X 3Ds getting fried. So it was unclear if the issue was entirely resolved. Well, now we're seeing reports that there is another update to ASRock's 800 series motherboards. This is BIOS update 3.40 for this update, and I was looking to see if anybody had reports. I don't have one of these boards myself, but I was looking to see if there was any reports that it could be changing things that might indicate they're trying to fix this issue some more, if their original BIOS update maybe didn't completely solve the issue. So here we're seeing that report on Reddit that they've changed a lot in terms of external voltages. LLC for the SoC is now fixed to 3 instead of auto, and this new fixed 1.2 fixed VSoC voltage with the Expo profile. The view is changed for all the memory OC settings too, and that's about it. And they're saying that that was on a B850 Pro A Wi-Fi. Now, I'm really hoping that we get confirmation that with the latest BIOS updates that ASRock motherboards are good to go, safe to use, because Hardware Unboxed recently just released an AMD B850 motherboard roundup for the sub $200 models, which is where I would generally go. Like, I don't recommend, unless you really need an expensive motherboard for some actual feature it offers that is actually necessary for something you're doing. I really think in a lot of PC builds, people are overspending on their motherboard when you could have put that toward, you know, a faster GPU, faster CPU, something that would be a little more tangible in what you're getting for it and your performance. Anyway, Hardware Unbox motherboard roundup when testing out the VRMs actually did see ASRock boards taking the lead in this situation, a lot doing significantly worse. Definitely, again, follow the link in the video description if you want to take a look at the review. But again, ASRock putting up good numbers here, also seem to have some of the better price listings. But again, you know, if I'm recommending a PC build right now, I might hesitate to recommend ASRock, especially if it was to be with the 9800X 3D or something like that, given the you know, history of issues we'd seen, and that again, in my research, I couldn't 100% feel like it had been entirely resolved. So I'm hoping that this is a sign that things have, you know, been looked at some more. Anyway, I want to follow the situation and get an idea for if anybody with this new update actually has issues. We'll see. Maybe if you guys have this, you could let me know in the comment section your experience. Now, in other news related to AMD CPUs, I was seeing posted by Momomo that certain AMD CPU models that were bundled with stock coolers are losing the stock cooler, and others are switching which stock cooler is available. Now, this initial post, I was having a little bit of confusion over exactly which models were being affected, but videocards.com does have more information on this. They are claiming that for boxed CPUs such as the Ryzen 7 7700 and Ryzen 9 7900, AMD will no longer include the Wraith Prism, leaving customers to purchase aftermarket cooling if needed. So those CPUs, the Ryzen 7 7700 and Ryzen 9 7900, No more box cooler. Gonna have to get your own aftermarket cooling. And then they're saying for MPK versions like Ryzen 7 8700G and Ryzen 5 3400G, the bundled cooler will switch. So it won't be gone, it will be switched to the smaller Wraith Stealth. Anyway, so yeah, it seems like overall a downgrade for what you're getting. Hopefully the price goes down along with that, but I have a feeling it won't, because that's how these things go. But yeah, it is what it is. I'm just reporting on that news. Speaking of which, it's looking like Gigabyte and MSI have announced availability of new 27-inch QD-OLED monitors with 500 hertz refresh rate and DisplayPort 2.1 UHBR20. I believe that's the full 80 gigabit per second version. Do they have that stat in here somewhere? Yes, it looks like they do. So, honestly, display stream compression really works pretty well, but it's not technically lossless. It's called visually lossless. It's not completely lossless. So having DisplayPort 2.1 at high enough bandwidth to actually just without display stream compression have no issues with your full stats and all of that is only a good thing. So nice to report on those. Here's some specs and all that. Again, links will be in the video description. I want to move on to this. So Circana puts out a whole bunch of, interesting statistics on a pretty regular basis. For example, the Nintendo Switch 2 has now surpassed 2 million units sold in the US to date, and it's currently 75% ahead of the unit sales pace set by the original Nintendo Switch. Now, part of that could be the original Nintendo Switch could have outpaced it if enough supply had been available, etc. But anyway, that's where it's at. But also, they post game sales, which I always find interesting to follow. For July, here's the results for the top 20, with a bunch of, EA Sports taking the top, with EA Sports College Football 26 and EA Sports MVP Bundle taking the top 2 spots, with number 3, Donkey Kong Bonanza, and number 4, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4. However, I'm more interested in year to date, just kind of getting an idea for how 2025 is stacking up. So these are the 2025 year to date results. We've got number 1 is still Monster Hunter Wilds, and number 2 is Elder Scrolls for Oblivion Remastered. I would consider these two some of the worst optimized games of the year, so you can definitely tell that a game does not need to be well optimized to have super high sales, so there's that. The new EA Sports College Football 26 has already hit number 3 for the entire year, despite having just released, with Call of Duty Black Ops 6 being displaced there. Got MLB The Show at number 5. Now, I was very pleasantly surprised to see that Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is still hanging on here in the almost, now dropped to the bottom half of the top 10, but still number 6 for the year. And, this doesn't feel like, look at everything that's coming before this. This is just absolutely big mainstream stuff. Monster Hunter Wilds, Elder Scrolls, EA Sports, Call of Duty, MLB The Show, boom. A super hardcore, systems-heavy RPG that, really feels like it would only appeal to a super niche-type audience, and yet, number 6 for the year so far. I think that's a confirmation that if game developers, publishers, whoever's funding and making these decisions wants to double down on some hardcore systems heavy RPG stuff that you might feel is kind of niche, if you make a great game of that style, people will buy it. Again, number 6 for the year so far. That's looking pretty good. Anyway, you could round out the top, the top 10 with WWE 2K25, Elden Ring, Night Rain, Split Fiction, NBA 2K25. So again, looking at that top 10, you're like, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. That's a pleasant surprise in there, given the kind of game that it's in there with. Interesting stuff. But let's go ahead and move along here. My favorite game of the year is Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Did that make the list at all? I don't think it did. Well, anyway, hopefully this one has some like long tail on the sales. Great game. And we're seeing an interview with the developer talking about this being the start of a franchise, which is certainly interesting. A lot of people kind of assumed that it might be the start of a franchise, but we do have this quote now. Yeah, so Clair Obscur is a franchise name. Expedition 33 is one of the stories that we want to tell in this franchise. Exactly what it will look like and what the concept will be is still too soon to announce, but what is sure is that this is not the end of the Clair Obscur franchise. Now, I don't want to do any sort of spoilers for this game because the story is one of the main drawing points. It is excellent, but I will say that it ended at a place where there's certainly room in the world of this game to continue telling stories in that world. However, if they're inspired by more of the Final Fantasy model, it could also be the case that you just have Clair Obscur something else taking place in its own universe, its own stuff, etc. So I wouldn't say that this is necessarily confirmation that the story will be continued. I think we'll still have to wait and see on that for confirmation of that. Now, recent game releases, we see Metal Gear Solid Delta in serious performance issue land. Now, I have not had a chance to test this out for myself at this point. I am still a full-time math teacher, and this is my in-service week. I get students next week. Today's getting classroom ready, lesson plans ready, tons of meetings, all of that. My kids started school this week, so been rather busy. Didn't end up having time to check this out. I also noticed that the PC version appears to have a 60 FPS frame rate cap, which doesn't seem to be able to be removed at this point, which doesn't make it great for benchmarking. You basically just can benchmark, can it hold 60 FPS? I've seen a lot of benchmarks showing that at least the initial launch of the first level has some major stutters, seem to smooth out a bit after that, so maybe it's the kind of shader compilation that gets caught early and then fixed, but just in general, that 60 FPS limit, some stutters, poor performance, the consoles can't even lock to 60 FPS, etc. Just doesn't bode super well for this. But again, I don't have my own reporting to go off, my own testing to go off of for that. But how about we call this a tale of two remakes / remasters? Because we've also have Gears of War Reloaded, which I think was an Unreal Engine 3 game. And it's coming out with, I think, really just updates to that rather than going with a UE5 overlay over the original or something like that, which is what Metal Gear Solid Delta is doing. Now, the original game here wasn't an older version of Unreal Engine, but it seems to be an Unreal Engine 5 remake of that. Now, whereas the Gears of War Reloaded seems to be just upgrading the Unreal Engine 3, as far as I can tell. It does not seem to be an Unreal Engine 5 game, and performance seems to be quite good. Now, I'm not saying that these are graphically equivalent or even equivalent style games, etc., but there certainly seems to be a tale of two remasters when it comes to the kinds of performance numbers that are being reported from this. Now, once again, did not have time to check out Gears of War Reloaded performance myself personally. But Unreal Engine 5 continues to have a lot of games with poor performance. Not every game. I mean, honestly, Clair Obscur wasn't exactly, a beacon of perfection and optimization, but it ran pretty reasonably well on medium settings, and the medium settings didn't look much worse than the maximum settings, and, you could play it on pretty reasonable hardware, etc. Whereas then you see games like Metal Gear Solid Delta, which apparently are in much worse shape. Now, interestingly, the Epic's CEO, Epic, the developer of Unreal Engine, says Unreal Engine 5 performance issues are mainly caused by development process leaving optimization last. In other words, are we kind of are we blaming the devs? Well, I mean, honestly, we do see some well-optimized Unreal Engine 5 releases. It just certainly seems to be more of the exception rather than the rule. So maybe there is a skill issue in the implementation of the engine. Certainly seems to be the case. Does the engine itself have issues? You know, I would say that the later versions of the engine seem to have gotten significantly better to my knowledge, like with 5.6 performing a lot better than like 5.0, for example. But, you know, a lot of the releases that we're getting now are maybe, you know, on those older versions of the engines or, you know, engine, etc. So anyway, certainly interesting to see what comes of Unreal Engine 5 and more games. What does optimization look like there? But yeah, so seems like we're getting at least some blame on the game devs waiting till the end to optimize stuff rather than having that be a main focus throughout the development process, which does seem to be a reasonable thing to bring up. But anyway, what do you guys think about all this news today? Let me know what you think. You can support the channel with the join button down there. But also just viewers, commenters, subscribers. Huge thank you to everybody, and I hope all of you have an excellent day.